I just wanted to start our conversation with this quote from James Hillman. This is from Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart, and it begins the section on language. Hillman writes, poems, beyond their human meanings, beyond their human feelings, enliven Nanola, what Trobrianders call moral intelligence. By teaching men to speak well, men learn to speak up and out. Isn't this precisely what is needed, according to Confucius, to refound society? In today's world, we need to refound society and utilize language with moral intelligence.
You know, I remember that quote, I think, where it was that the one that has to begin to reform society, you have to begin with the language itself, right?
Yes,
Reviving the language or somehow there was a recentering of the language, though, in a whole fresh field of meaning and so on.
that's
Like you
right.
have to bring the language back to life. Maybe that's a really good clue to why and how it was that poetry ended up being it ended up being the vessel by which we got the whole conferences moving into the water and across the water. Poetry really was our canoe, it seemed like to me. It's what got us into the water somehow, into the work. It got us there, it carried us.
If poetry is the canoe, I think stories are probably the big barge.
Yes, they
you know,
played a big role for sure.
yeah,
There is something about how poetry itself would just transform the room. The stories definitely do that too. But do you
yeah.
remember how well they would really transform our bodies so that our bodies were really in the room in a way that just before the poetry started, we weren't there that way. And then
Yeah.
suddenly, boom, we were. I remember
Yep.
that.
I had, known about the conference for 15 or 20 years. So I feel like I came in already a part of things, especially because of the poetry and how much I love the electricity that poetry adds to any amount of oxygen in the air. It's great to breathe it in when it's in the room.
Oh,
Yeah.
yep. You know,
You know, while it
what?
was years before, I felt like you did, Jesse, that somehow I felt like I knew the place of the space, even though it had only been going 3 years or 4 years once I finally got there. But by knowing Robert's poetry, intimately and deeply, I felt already like I knew my way there and knew what the place would be, even though it was still shocking to see that many guys back then, like 100 guys. But definitely the poetry, it delivered something in advance of actually getting to the conference. The poetry of the conference, that's the life of the conference, got to us, it sounds like, before we got to the conference, which
Mm.
is really saying something.